Okay, so the pants have a similar pattern to them. They have this triangle pattern that's the same on the pockets, and that implies that the pants and the jacket come from a set. So we're going to put the same kind of leather look on the pants. That's going to be obviously pretty straightforward. We're simply going to copy, we'll copy jacket arm because it doesn't have the UV stuff on it. Copy that and put it on our pants. And that's on the body model. Now I have a pants back and a pants front UV, and the reason for that is in case we want to put anything on there, we've just cut the pants in half front and back and laid them on flat UV sets. There's almost no doubt that we're going to want to put some detail in here. The material isn't really looking fantastic yet, but it'll be a lot easier since it's kind of a reflective material. We really need to see what it looks like in motion before we can make those judgments. So we're going to save those decisions until we have rendered our turntable. Next, let's look at this shoulder pad. The shoulder pad comes in two parts. Let's just zoom in and take a closer look at it. There we go. And once again, I'm going to pop into the body and turn off the nodes so that we get a faster update. Okay, so like the knee pad, we have this funny shoulder pad shape with a star on it, and it's got some studs on it. So let's look at see what the materials are. We have edging, main, rivet, stars, and strap. So that'll be the top one. The other one has edging, main, rivets, and strap. So edging is this area. The main is the main part of it. We can see the strap is on top there. You might not see the strap on the bottom one. And the nice thing is we can steal from other elements that we've already taken the time to texture for these things. So let's take a look at what we had on the knee pad. So right at the top here we have, let's just close these. Right at the top we have knee left and knee right. And we have, there's our main, there's our stars. Let's back off and just take a look at that. See if we can get them both in the view here. That'd be convenient. Okay, so the left one has the skull and the teeth and the little stars. The right one has the brass star. So let's see here. Let's grab the stars from the right one, and we'll drop it right onto both of these. Well, the one that has the star here, right here. And let's look at the mains here. I think we'll make up our own main for that one. And maybe we'll try this brass out on the rivets as well. And I'm actually going to steal the leather from the gloves to put onto the straps here. So let's see where it's in the body. Gloves, there we go. And the nice thing about this is it's totally procedural. Because it's not painted on UV maps and it's totally procedural, it can go on any material without a UV set. And this is the real advantage of procedural textures. I'm not saying that procedural textures are always the answer, but if you can create a texture that's completely procedural, that's something you should keep in and it's a common one like leather glove, and you should keep it in a library because it'll save you a lot of work. So we'll gloves, copy, and want to paste it onto these straps. And I think in the case of this shoulder pad, I'd like to go with a real caramel look. So for the main, I'm going to pick a, let's pop into nodes here, and we'll pick a nice olive drab color. That's a constant color. We'll plug it into color here. And And then let's find a nice olive drab. And not quite drab enough. Okay, and then let's add a procedural to that. Well, maybe I should have done the procedural first. We'll take this flakes. Flakes makes a great. Yeah, it's got both of its colors right in there, so I don't even need this one. So since I took a moment to pick this color, I'm going to store it in the second slot there. And I can actually just disconnect this, stick color on there, open it up, and for my first color, I can use the olive drab color that I picked. So you can see the flakes happening there. They're a little too large, so let's scale them down. They're 1 meter is always the base size for everything by default. And what we want to do is take our second color, use it, but then we want to make it a little darker. And it looks like that pattern's too small now, so let's try 1/2 meter. Still a little too large, or too small rather. Yeah, that's reading a lot better. And then the edging, I'd like to be just one of the olive drab colors. So I will grab the edging, just give it that color. Maybe fade it a little bit by turning the saturation down, or rather by turning the value up. That makes it a little too bright, so I need to desat. And we want it to be kind of a cloth edge, so we definitely want our specularity off. And that's not a bad first pass. We'll just copy these onto the other part of the shoulder pad. Now, to make these main parts of the shell feel a little badly used, because right now they're perfectly smooth and specular, we need to drop a little bit of noise into the specularity channel. So let's do that with the top one here. Just make sure we have the right one here. Yep, that's the top one. So we'll go into our nodes, and we have a spec right there, and the spec value can currently be seen right here. It's 100% because it's not overridden by nodes yet. If something's overridden by the nodes, it'll be grayed out. Like color is grayed out because we have a node plugged in there. So let's go over here. Let's add a procedural texture. Let's see. Yeah, crackle's a nice one. And let's plug that into our specularity, and we're going to need to size it down. So 1/10 of a meter to start with. Let's just zoom in on that thing, see if we can get a closer look at it. Okay, there we go. Alright, so you see the spec is really nice and smooth right now. We're seeing the spec better on the bottom one, so let's try this on the bottom one, which is shoulder pad 2. Main, go back into nodes, grab the 3D texture, crumple. That wasn't the one we tried, but that'll be good enough. Crumple into spec, and you can see the breakup happening there. It's not quite as sharp as I would like it to be, so let's look at the values here. Let's try inverting it. Basically the same idea. Let's try increasing the scale a little bit. think I'm going to try a different one. What I'd like to do is sharpen up the contrast in the procedural. Yeah, that was it. Let's look in here and see if there's a contrast control. Let's try to find one that has contrast. Heteroterrain. Amplitude. So here's a perfectly good example of the kind of thing you're up against. If you're a new shading artist and you're trying to figure out how to use these tools, here's the kind of problem that you're going to be faced with. We have a shader called a node called multifractal. It's a fractal noise generator, and it has a bunch of parameters. Background color, foreground color, well, we can get that. The blending type, well, we've worked in Photoshop, we get that. Opacity, that makes sense. Invert, that makes sense. Now we start getting into some controls that make sense to software engineers, but don't make a lot of sense to us as artists. Increment, linearity, octaves, and offset. Noise type, Perlin value gradient noise, lattice convolution, sparse convolution. What do those mean? We have no idea. We're not software engineers. So this is one of the largest challenges facing CG artists without a coding background, and that is 95% of all CG artists. So our problem is that we need to figure out what these mean. And there really isn't any way for us to figure out what they mean except to simply try them out. So what we'll do, for example, is we'll just take the bump and drop it into specular, because this is really just the luminance of this, and you can see how that's working right now, or rather, I'm sorry, the alpha should go in there, because the alpha acts as the luminance of the channel. There you can see a nice breakup happening. Now let's see if we can get a little bit more visible and then see exactly what's happening. Actually, to make it more visible, let's just unplug the color for now. That doesn't help us, that makes it harder. Let's turn our diffuse down until we can see the spec very easily. Okay, there we go. So experimentally, we're just going to have our diffuse down for now so we can see our spec, so we can see what's going on when we mess around with this multifractal noise. We can invert it, and all that does is switch around what's white and what's black. Now let's look at increment. Let's see if we can get nice and zoomed in there so we can take a close look at this. Let's try an increment of 1 and see what happens. Well, that seems to have flattened it right out. Let's try 0.5. Let's try 0.2. Okay, so increment seems to have something to do with how bright it becomes. It becomes brighter. Let's try 0.01. So it seems to have something to do with the contrast, and that's actually good. That's what I was looking for. Let's try 0.001. Let's try 0. So an increment of 0 is actually making it look quite nice. Now let's try linearity of 2.5. Let's try linearity of 1 and see what happens. So linearity of 1 flattens it out. 1.5. Okay, it's interesting. So it becomes less complex with a lower linearity. More complex with 2. See how it's softer as the linearity goes lower. 2.5 is what it was set at by default. That's pretty nice detail in there. Let's try 3 and see what happens. It's even more detailed and broken up. Let's try 5. So what's happening here is as you go higher in linearity, the noise kind of fills in. And as you go lower, the noise kind of spreads out. It makes more open empty spaces. And that's where the word linearity comes from. Linearity from the old, whatever it is, Latin word lac for lake, which originally meant a big, wide, open, empty space. So whenever you see the term linearity, and I know it's impossible as an artist for you to know this, I figured this out. whenever you see linearity, they're talking about the how, in one way or another, the empty spaciness of the procedural texture. So I'm looking for something. Let's see. Let's try. I'm going to try 3, and then I'm going to scale it up to see if I can get more empty spaces. So I'm going to go for a 2 meter, double the scale of it. I'm going to try to double the scale again. Doubling the scale doesn't really seem to do much in terms of breaking it up. This is actually looking pretty good, around 4. So I have a texture there, a nice specular texture, with a decent, fairly sharp breakup. I can try different noise types, keeping these same values. Perlin noise, that might be good inverted. Let's take a look at that. Yeah, that's actually really nice. Or that's value noise. Let's try gradient noise. We'll uninvert it. That's too tight for what I'm looking for. And any artist is not going to know exactly what each of these noises do, although I'm sure you could research it and find out. Most artists don't really have time for that, so they just go through the noises until they find one that is visually appealing for whatever specific process they're using. So I'm going to go back to value noise and invert it because that looked pretty good to me. Alright, so now I'll go back and turn my diffuse back up and plug my color back in. So now I have this interesting breakup across the material. Now I don't necessarily want to put this into the bump because I don't want it to seem like it's a really chewed up piece. I just want it to feel like it's maybe a little bit dirty, mishandled, been through a little bit of battle. And I'm going to copy that and put it back on the top one as well. So now when we rotate through light, we should notice. Here, let me just do this. Okay, that's interesting. We don't seem to be seeing any specularity on the top one here, so let's investigate that. So we should be seeing it for sure. Let's actually just rotate the light and be sure about that. Ah yes, there's some speck happening on there for sure. And it is broken up as well. So that's good. That's what we want to be happening. Okay, next we will take a look at Masterfrag's frag grenade. Okay, so here's our grenade. Just take a look at it in a perspective view here. And the geometry is fairly simple, and it's been laid out in a really quick and kind of messy UV map. But that's okay. I don't think we're going to need much in the way of UV except for the body. So we have the handle, the pin, all those little bits and pieces are laid out in UV sets. I don't really think we're going to use that. We can probably do that procedurally. The body, however, is done in a nice cylindrical unwrap, and we're going to use that for sure. So let's capture that and go into Photoshop and get to work on that. Okay. So the question is, first of all, well, let's just take a look at Masterfrag. What do we want his grenade to look like? Typically, we think of grenades as kind of an olive drab, some kind of a green. I'm suggesting that we might want to do something a little bit different than that because Masterfrag, maybe he has some super high-tech, crazy new frag grenade, and Who knows, maybe the weapons designers want to make sure it's very carefully differentiated from other normal ones, so maybe it's blue or yellow. That's actually an interesting idea. Maybe if we make it half blue and half yellow with some interesting text on it. So let's start by, we'll split it right in half here. So I'm just going to take the top half down to that middle kind of, it's got, if you look at it, it's got this middle kind of ridge around it. I think we'll maybe make that a separate color. So the top color, let's pick a nice kind of UN blue, and we'll drop that in. And then Control D to drop that. Select the bottom half up to that middle bit, and we'll give that one a nice kind of danger yellow. Drop that in, and we'll pick the rest in the middle and give that a white-ish, not quite all the way white. And these are going to need a little bit of personality. Simple colors are way too garish. So let's do a little bit of dodge and burn on them. So the idea of dodge and burn is you want to keep kind of in the same tones, and you want to provide a little bit of dirt and a little bit of fade. So we'll just kind of procedurally drop a little nonsense in here. Go into highlights, a little bit of dirt, and then go to our dodge tool. See if we can get a little bit of variation in here. Just want to break it up a little bit. And then maybe we'll pick a little more interesting brush. Okay, so we're going to want to turn our exposure way down in here. Just multiple undo those. For those of you who don't know, of course, Control Z is undo, and if you want to undo multiples in Photoshop, it's Control Alt Z. So let's turn our exposure down. I'll just drop some interesting, a little bit of detail in here. Okay, so let us save this and throw it on the grenade and just see how it looks. Save it as grenade.col and pop into layout, surface editor, and here's our grenade. It's only got one material on it. Let's turn on our nodes, add a 2D texture image. The image will be loaded. EFG grenade call. And we want it to be a UV map. And the map is grenade body. And then we just plug it in. Okay, so obviously those colors are awful, way too garish, and the spec is all wrong and everything. I'd like to split out our other parts of the grenade into different materials. So let's just pop into Modeler here and do that right now. So Q ring, Q handle. I think that's it. Other details, oh yeah, I missed the actual pin itself. Q pin. Alright, away we go back over here. All right. So let's go in first thing and make some adjustments to those colors. So back into Photoshop, what we want to do is desaturate. Image, adjust, hue saturation, and bring the saturation down significantly will really help with this. So let's just try this. We'll save it as a version 2. Once again, it's destructive and we won't be able to come back. We'd have to reconstruct it if we decided we want to come part way back. So we'll save this as a version 2, and that gives us the option, of course, of going all the way back to beginning. So we'll place this grenade color version 2. And let's zoom in on that grenade and take a closer look at it. Okay, so now we've gone too far and it's looking like a cute little Easter egg. So what can we do about that? Well, we can close this one, go back and reload our version 1, and desaturate it not so much. Let's bring the lightness down a little bit as well. That might help take the garishness off it. And we'll save this one over version 2, which it's okay to do this destructively because we know we don't like our version 2. In most cases, it's not okay to oversave any of your data. But in cases like this where you've done an experiment, you know it's clearly not going to work, it's totally okay. And in the image editor, we will replace that. Reload it. Okay. The colors are feeling better. They're not too garish, not too Easter eggy, but they definitely need a lot more detail. Beginning with some text. Let's throw some text on there. So what might be on there? Well, let's see. It's going to be, it probably should feel stenciled. And it probably should be white. And let's pick a stencil text. We should have stencil here. Yep. And let's see. Let's make it large enough for this. We'll call it frag MX 181. And then underneath it, we're going to put CGM, and that means CG Masters, of course. And we'll save this. Control S to save. Back into Layout, Image Editor, Reload. Okay, and that's reasonably well placed. I think we'd like it to be a little larger, a little further to the left, and a little lower. So let's do that. A nice beauty of continuing to work in Photoshop layers is that that's unbelievably easy to do. A little more to the left, a little lower, and then of course we can scale it up. And it felt a little stretched, so I'm going to push it back a little bit. Save it. Reload. And now I've gone a little too far to the left. And I don't think white is quite the right color. And I think I've also gone a little bit too large. So let's adjust that again. A little too far to the left. Edit. Transform scale. Bring it down in size a little bit. And I think I'd like to break up the stencil a little bit. So let's grab our eraser and we'll size it down. We're going to need to rasterize this layer before we're allowed to edit into it. So let's zoom in and chew up our stencil a little bit. That'll be nice. Eraser, a small one. So what we're doing here by chewing up the edges is we're just suggesting the paint is chipped a little bit. So we're making it not quite as fresh and nice as it used to be. Because Master Frag, he doesn't carry around a totally fresh grenade. He's a lot tougher than that. He doesn't need fresh grenades. So let's chew it up a little bit, change the size a few times so we have different sizes of chips. Got some nice detail. And then we're also going to chip off a bunch of the yellow and blue paint. We're going to do that with a reflection map. And you'll see how that works. Reflection and diffuse map, probably a bump map. It'll probably be all one map actually. Okay, so let's save that and see how that's looking. Okay, that's looking a little more interesting. Now let's create a map for our paint chipping. So back into Photoshop, zoom out, create a new layer. And we're going to turn off this one, and we're going to turn off this one, and we're going to call this save as grenade diff. We're going to use it for a bunch of stuff, and we're just going to pick an interesting brush and chew it up a little bit. Let's see what we can get here for something a little bit more interesting. That's no good. Last thing we want is the very last thing we want, believe it or is maple leaves. I'm going to start, let's see. None of this is working. And that's okay. That happens sometimes. You just whip through and if stuff isn't working, you just really need to ditch it and start again. Let's see what we have here. This should be a good, this is a good one. There we go. And of course I forgot to put in my background layer. So once again, just erase everything. Drop in my background layer, which should be a medium gray. I'll just leave those dots there. They're helpful. And then we'll start painting in some of this nonsense. Give it a better opacity. Let's give it opacity of 100%. All right, that's pretty interesting. I've changed my mind. I think I'm going to want the background to be completely black in this case, because since I'm creating paint chips, I want there to be no reflection in certain areas and some reflection in other areas. So that's the process. Sometimes you're working your way through it, you stop, you rethink it. Yeah, there we go. So just try this for now. So I've already renamed it to diff, so I can save that. In Photoshop, or rather in Lightwave, I can go into my surface editor. There's my grenade material. I'll go into nodes. I'll add another. I'll copy and paste this since it's already set up with the UV map. Simply change the image, which is grenade diff. There it is. That's the correct map. And I'm going to plug this into, I'm going to plug the luma of it into diffuse. And I want to invert it. That doesn't seem to be working. So let's try an invert node. There we go. Now that's working, and that's what I want to be happening. Now I'm going to need to be a little bolder with my map, but this is now working properly. Where it's white on the map, I have diffuse of 0, so it's quite dark. And then where I have black on the map, it's diffuse of 100%, or whatever the value is. Now I want to also put this into my reflection, but I don't want the inverted one. I want it to be reflective where it's white and not reflective where it's black. So I'll just grab straight out of the luma output. And now you can see where it's 0 diffuse, it's now also reflective. So what that does is that implies that there's paint chips off here. Now what we need to do is go back and be a little bit more aggressive with our map to make this stuff read. So let's do that. Go back into Photoshop and get a little more aggressive. Now we'll see what happens there. And we need our image editor to replace that image. Grenade diff, reload. Let's see how that's working for us. Alright, so a little too aggressive down here. There's some nice stuff happening, and nice breaks happening. Let's clean that up. That's, which one is that? That's this one right here. So we need to break that up with some black. We can do that. Probably need to break this one up a bit too. And we'll try that out. Alright, that speck is really bugging me. So I think we need to apply our map to the speck as well. So let's see which way do we want to go. Speck. See how that, if that helps at all. Let's try the inverted one. Let's try the not inverted one. Yeah, that's better. I imagine they wouldn't make this stuff too shiny. You know, I'm just imagining camouflage. You wouldn't want a lot of super shiny things on your person to give yourself away. That's looking okay. Now this middle white part is really sticking out to me. It looks like, I mean, if it's been hanging here for a long time, it feels like since that's sticking out, it should have more dirt right along the edge. So I'm going to paint a little bit of that in. We need our color back. And let's just grab a gray, a little bit of dirt. We'll just paint some of that in. Gently, softly. Gently and softly. kind of thinking there might be some crud in the corners here too. It's always nice to add layer after layer of crud. Crud usually helps sell. Lots and lots of layers of dirt and crud and nonsense for sure. Maybe some crud up towards the top as well. A little darker maybe. And probably some along the bottom as well. Alright, let's see how that looks. That crud along the bottom needs to come up. And that crud along the middle needs to be a little higher as well. So let's zoom in here a little bit. Okay, let's look at our diffuse value here. I think we need to bring our overall diffuse value down a little bit. The overall diffuse of the color. Now, I'm not sure if I want to mess with this. Yeah, no, I will. I'm going to multiply this by a constant. So I'm going to add a constant scalar, and I'm going to do a math scalar mult, and we'll just multiply these two things together. So the scalar is 1 by default, 1.0, so right now there's no difference at all. I should rename this diff mult. It's my diffuse multiplier. And as I turn this down, you'll see the color gets darker. So let's try 0.5. So that brings them down quite a lot, too much probably. Let's try 0.7. Yeah, okay, we'll leave it there for now. This gives us the option to actually make diffuse changes to our color map right here in the node editor, and that's pretty nice. Okay, so let's pick a color for our handle. I kind of feel like the handle should be the blue. So let's find out what that is. Let's actually, here's an interesting thought. Let's just take our image map for our grenade and just apply it to the handle and see what happens. So I'm just going to copy this and paste it right to the handle. And it came out on the yellow side. Well, that's interesting. I'd like to put it in the blue side and get this nice blue dirt on it. So here's what we can do. I could paint an entirely new map for it, or I can go into Modeler and I can look at the position of those pieces of geometry in the UV set. So let's go to our grenade handle here. And I can also put the UV map in the background, which I'm going to do. And it should be grenade color version 2. There it is. So now I can take these handle bits and I can reposition them up here so that they are in the color side that I want them to be. So I'm going to do that. grab this side bit. I don't want them to be in the text. That would be weird. But I do want them to be here. Maybe I'll just rotate them in here as well. Get the handle into the nice cruddy area. That'd be nice. Darn it, I've picked up another piece of geo here by accident. I don't want that. Okay, there we go. And I can do the same with this piece of handle. I might even want to put it in exactly the same UV space. And the back of the handle wants to go up there too. And I probably want to put it in a similar space as well, so they match up. And let's see, I have all these bits and pieces. I'll stick them up there as well. That's interesting. Oh, it's so nice to have these connected polys stuck in here, isn't it? All right. So we'll save the object like this, pop back into layout, see what happens to our UVs. Well, nothing happened, and the reason for that is obviously that the handle has its own UV set, and I'm using the grenade body UV set. So I need to pop into my nodes and change this from the UV grenade body to grenade handle. And there we go. All right. Looks like we still got some yellow in there. That's okay for now. And then these rings. Now I'd like these rings to be a shiny metal. They should be like a stainless steel. These are not the kind of things you want rusting and breaking. So I'm going to make the rings into a simple metal. In our nodes, that's really easy with a material called conductor. And I simply want to make it pretty highly specular. And this is a delta material. In other words, it's energy conserving. So whereas with the regular layer editor, or the old layer editor, you'd have to turn the diffuse down and turn the reflection up so that you weren't reflecting too much light information, because diffuse is diffuse reflected light and reflection is image reflected light. So if you had diffuse at 100 and reflection at 100, you're effectively reflecting 200% of the light that's hitting it, which is physically impossible. This material, as you turn the specularity up, the diffuse automatically goes down. So it's conserving energy, which is pretty close to physically correct. So we're not going to go all the way to 100 because that'll make it look like shiny chrome. That's too much. Let's go to, say, let's try 70 or 60. Yeah, 60 is pretty good. Nice shiny metal, and we'll drop that also onto the pin for now. The pin is very tiny and difficult to see. It may be almost irrelevant. And I want to go back into the surface editor and turn Master Frag Skin back on. let's take a look at this guy. So Master Frag is starting to look pretty cool. Oh, we still haven't done his eyeballs and his cigar, or his teeth. But before we get to those, there's one thing that's really bugging me, and that's the hair. I just can't take it. So what I did was I contacted the artist William Proton Vaughn and asked him if he'd mind giving me a new hair set with UVs on it. So that's what he did. So let's go ahead and take care of that hair right now. So here's the current hair object. And if we look in Modeler, here's the hair, and it does not have a UV set on it. The hair's great. So I asked William to redo it. So let's do a quick object replace here. So under items, with the hair selected, simply go replace with object, and it's Master Frag hair version 3. So there's the new hair that's replaced the old hair, and it's untextured because it's brand new back from the modeling department. Let's take a closer look at it here. And the fact that it's white and gray as opposed to orange and on fire is actually pretty good. I think it might be nice for us to put some gray streaks in his hair. I want to give the sense that he's a powerful man, but maybe also really experienced, and I think a little bit of gray in there is really going to give him that sense of experience. So let's take a look at the model and see what William has done to change it. I'll just save this. I need to save the scene with a new model in it. So looking back at the model here, so here's the hair. It looks very similar to the way the hair looked before, and what he's done is he's separated it out into 3 different pieces of hair. He's taken each piece of hair and put it into one of 3 of these piles, and they're distributed. So if we look at just this set of hair strands, you can see that they're fairly well distributed throughout the head, and the same thing with this set. So these are just geometry stacked over and over and over each other. And once again, the same thing with this one here. So 3 sets of hair, fairly well distributed. So we want to create a color map and possibly diffuse and bump and maybe even reflection map. So what we know is if we select the bottom is that the wide part is the bases of the hair. So that's the direction we want our color to go. So let's start by creating a color map. Go into Photoshop, close this stuff down. Usual routine. You should be well used to this by now. New layer. And we'll start with the color map. I'm thinking black hair, and what this means is for our dramatic sense, we'll probably put a little tinge of dark blue in it. Black hair tends to sometimes reflect as if there's a little bit of blue highlight in it, especially if it's really dark black, and a little bit of gray towards the roots. So let's just start by dropping in a really dark black. And we'll even start with a pure black, although it won't end up that way. Actually, no, I'm not comfortable with that. We'll start with just a little bit above black. Pure black is just bad. Drop that in. Lower opacity so we can see through. And then let's pick a slightly lighter black. I'll just start painting in. Let's find an interesting brush, nice streaky interesting brush here. There we go. We can actually just turn the opacity back up so we can actually see what we're doing here. All right, pick a lighter. Let's actually pick a different angle. Actually, that angle is okay, I guess. Our flow is too high. There we go. Let's change the angle a little bit. We'll go 90 degrees. And it's okay if you go over in your fill, because you can, I mean, it gives you an opportunity to add more complexity. We can always switch back to a darker one and just paint more layers in. So it's not like you're constantly having to go over. It's not like you're constantly having to reduce. One really good way to bring these down is to use your burn tool. So you put streaks back into areas that are a little too heavy. Nice and straightforward way to do it. And the trick, as always, is going to be lots and lots of layers of complexity. This could actually also work as a bump map. So I want to bring it down nice and low, and then we'll throw in some highlights and we'll go the other direction. Oops, that was a little too heavy. Okay. Just gently want to take that down. Nice layers of complexity. All right, so now we want to look at our UV set, and we want to drop in a little bit of gray in the roots. So down here, up here, and down here. These are our roots. We'll just start with something pretty rough and just see where it gets us. So experimentally, we'll just save this. Save as hair color. And go into layout and apply that. So surface editor, we want the master flag hair, And there are three, he's even put three different hair textures on, a different hair texture for each one of those. So we'll apply it to one and then copy it to all three. And this is actually an opportunity for us to do even more variation. You can see he's done color variations in there. So that's pretty neat. So for the first one, hair one, add a node, 2D node image. We'll load our image up, hair color. And set it as a UV map. Hair is the UV set. And plug it into the color channel. Let's just unplug it and see if we can see where it's reading here. Oh, I see it. Right in here. You can see it in some of those darker ones. That's actually looking really interesting. Let's open the surface editor and copy that to the other two. See how that's looking. That's pretty promising. Really liking that. We just need to work on getting our gray into the roots. So let's look at that a little more extensively. Okay. And we'll go a little lighter. See if we can get it to read a little bit better. Save it. And then fire up our image editor and reload the image. All right, there we go. So that's starting to read now. I really want to find out where this central one is. And that's definitely ending too abruptly, so we're going to need to do some blending in there. So let's get down to the nitty-gritty. I'm just going to go with a nice small brush. I'm just going to start painting in individual lines. Sometimes you just have to reconcile yourself with the fact that you just kind of need to sit back, start really going custom painting in lots of individual lines, and just kind of be zen with it. Enjoy the experience. I'm going to actually reduce the opacity on this so I can follow the contour of the UVs a little bit. I think that's a good idea. Not everything can be done really super fast. There are things that you just have to go, okay, I'm going to take my time with this, do a nice job, make it really beautiful. That's the key to creating really fantastic artwork. Of course, my challenge is I have to try to do that and also get this training out to you in a not unreasonable period of time. So I am taking shortcuts, although I'm trying to demonstrate that sometimes you just kind of need to chill out and relax and enjoy the process and have fun with it and try out different things. That's the real path. I mean, being a great artist isn't something you just go to school and then are. You go to school to learn how to use the tools, and if you're lucky, your instructors will teach you some great foundational principles, and you take those foundational principles with you into the job market. And then you apply them, and through the application of those principles, that's how you learn to become a great artist. Nobody comes out of school as a great artist. That's kind of a life journey. All right. And I'm going to reverse this and paint some dark back in. Break it up a little bit the other way. Maybe I can just burn it in. Nice small brush to burn with as well. There we go. That should give us a nice breakup that follows the contours of those UVs. This stuff down here really needs it. And then it looks like, I mean, this is giving us some really nice highlight and shadow complexity, and this is the kind of map that is really great to use for a bump map / spec map. So we'll probably use this for that as well. Okay, well, let's just save this right now and see how it looks. I could sit there and do that for like an hour straight. I find that really enjoyable. Yeah, I'm really liking that. It's looking good. So let's open our surface editor and also apply this to take the Luma and stick it in specularity and glossiness and bump. Actually, we could just take the bump and stick it in bump. And I'm kind of wondering what will happen if we put it in reflection too, because once again, spec is just going to do specular highlights off the one light that's in the scene, whereas if I put it into reflection instead, it'll come from the whole environment. I'll probably have to turn it down though. So I'm going to need to multiply that by a constant. Add node constant vector. Oops, sorry. Constant scalar it's supposed to be. Add node constant scalar. And another math scalar mult. Stick that in one. Stick this in the other. And the result goes back into reflection. And for now, I'll just turn my scalar down to maybe 0.2. I don't want it to be that reflective. And I'm going to rename that reflection mult, so I always know what it is if my network becomes messy. Okay, let's back off in this guy and take a look at him. Save everything. Okay, so let's take a look at the cigar first. Go into Modeler and find our cigar here. There it is. Just this really simple little shape. And let's see if there's UVs on there. There is a cigar unwrap. Not sure we're going to need it. Let's see what surfaces we have on here. So all we have is one called default smoothing. We're going to need definitely two materials on here. So we'll call one cigar, and we're going to call the other one Q cigar fire, because this guy's cigar is going to be turned on and we want it to be nice and luminous and orange. So we're going to do that. So here's our cigar, and we now have two materials, our cigar, which isn't long enough, and our cigar fire. So what we're going to have to do is increase the amount of cigar here. So let's select in polygons mode, we'll select the material cigar and we'll expand it with the right square bracket. I think that'll do it. And that's now the cigar material. So let's think about what we want on there. Is there any materials that we have that are even marginally close to this? And there is one. I'm going to save that and go back into layout. And the one is our, once again, our glove texture. It's this nice brown. It's specular. We're going to have to take that off because the cigar leaf is pretty dried out, so it doesn't have a very high specularity at all. So we'll just turn the spec off and see if that's working for us. For now, I'm going to go to the surface editor, go to the body, copy the gloves, go to the cigar, and paste it on there. And then let's just zoom in on that. I want to go to the cigar. And take a nice close look at that. So once again, this is the real power of procedural textures. Because no UV map is required, they're easy to cut and paste on just about anything. So my thoughts are the specular highlight is way too tight and it's probably too dark brown. So opening up the surface editor, we'll go and take a look at that. You may remember all the procedural effort we put into this material when we did it on the gloves. So it's nice and complex already. Let's just change some of our parameters here. So here's the primary color. We'll bring our colors up in value to make them lighter. So still have the variation, just lighter color on the cigar. And we want to take the definitely the crackly fractals off. And we want to take the specular way down. So we'll just delete this. Need a little bit more real estate here. And I'll delete this, and I'm going to plug this directly into spec. So we have a simple scalar value, and I'm going to take it down to 0.1. And the glossiness is also a scalar value, so I can take that down also to maybe 0.2. And let's bring up the value of these colors as well. Okay. Okay, it's a little too light. I want to go a little darker. Okay, that'll do for the moment. That's roughly in the right colors. We're definitely going to need to work on that breakup a little bit, but let's get the tip happening. So the cigar fire, we'll make a new node network for that. I'm actually, once again, going to pop here into the skin and disable the nodes just for faster interactivity. And cigar fire is going to be luminous. So let us throw a procedural texture. Which one did we like? We liked the No, it wasn't the crust. It was the crumple, I think. 3D textures. Crackle, that was it. And we're going to plug that into the luminosity channel. And of course then we need to start adjusting it. So for example, the foreground color needs to be a nice Kelvin red, and the background color needs to be a nice Kelvin orange. And we need to plug this also into our color map. And we're going to need to size our texture way down to get some interesting breakup happening on there. And then we need to increase the luminosity value. So, because this is going 0 to 1 right now, and flames are way brighter than that, so we're going to do a mult again. Scalar multiply and a scalar constant. So now we're multiplying whatever value we put in here by the value from the procedural. Let's try 10. That's feeling right, but the color is obviously wrong. So what we need to do is find a darker, I don't know if we can go lower with this value. Or a nice rich feeling happening in there. There we go. That's feeling good. That may be a little bit too red. Alright, well I could noodle with that forever, but that's going to do for now. So let's take a look at our eyeballs. Back in Modeler. So we have these two eyeballs, and we'll look for a UV set on here. Eye left and eye right are pretty close to the same. So let's, that's interesting. That's an interesting idea. Let's grab our UV set here. Go into Photoshop and start playing. Okay, so we have to decide what we want his eyes to look like. I'm going to do an internet search and see if I can find an eye image that I can slap on here and then make my own modifications to. I'll be right back. So it took me about 5 seconds to find an image. I just did a Google image search for eye. And here it is. So we'll paste that in here. And it obviously needs to be sized up a little bit. Oh, maybe it doesn't. Might be about right. So we will just sample the white in here, drop it in around here, and we're going to save this as eye_color. This is a PSD, and pop it into layout. And we're going to apply that to the eyeballs. So here's our eyeballs. And we notice that both eyeballs only have one material. I think we really want to split them into two materials since there are two objects. Since they have two separate UV maps, they should be, I think, two materials. This is the left eye, so we'll call it eye left, and the other one we'll call eye right. Save it and pop back into layout. There we go. So here's our eye left. Pop into nodes, add the 2D texture image, load up the eye color PSD, and UV projected. And this is for eye left. And plug it straight into the color. Okay, so it looks like the eye color is quite a lot too large. That's fine, we can fix that. Let's do that. So we'll simply do an edit, transform, scale, and just move it back to about the center. Probably want to reduce its opacity so we can get that just right. There we go. And once again, we'll fill in the edges, although we may not need to. I'll do an image reload of our eye color. That's better. And then we'll copy and paste this to the eye right, but of course we're going to need to change the UV map because it now needs to be eye right UV. And I kind of had a thought that it would be a little freaky to have one eye a slightly different color than the other. So what I'd like to do is go into Photoshop and do some color variations on this. So we could, there's a bunch of different ways that we can adjust the image. Let's simply try our levels. We'll try our curves. So here we can just grab and move these curves around, so brighter and darker, because we're moving all three RGB channels together, or we can pick individual channels. For example, if I wanted to take the red out, I'll grab my red here and I can pull it down. So now I have a green eye and a brown eye. Or I can increase the red. But I think I want to take the red out. And I'm going to save this. I actually want to lighten this up first. I'm going to do some hue saturation. And I'm going to lighten it up. That's not quite right. I'm going to try brightness contrast. Brighten it up. Increase the contrast. Okay, we'll try something like that. I'll save it as a different file, of course, because I do not want to overwrite my original one. And go back into layout, and for this one, we'll simply pick different image, eye color 02. So now we have two different colored eyes, which is kind of strange. Okay, so our eyes still need a little bit of love. One of the things is they need some reflection on them. They're just too white. So let's work on the color first. I think we need a little bit of pink around the edges. Everybody has a little bit of pink around the edges of their eyes. So just paint a little bit around the edges here. That's way too heavy. And go a little bit more saturated for a little further out. And we'll save that, and we'll do the same thing for the eye color version 1. And we'll reload those images in layout and see if that is enough. Not seeing any red in there yet. Just gonna have to push way in, I guess. Yeah, try it again. Yeah, there we go. Some nice pink in the corners. That's looking really good. And now we need to give some reflectivity to both of our eyes. So go into our nose, go into our node's reflection is currently 0. We need a constant for that. Gives it a reflection of 1.0, which is 100%. We do not want that, so we'll set our reflection to maybe 0.1, about 10%. That should do the trick. And we want to do the same thing with the eye right as well. Add a scalar node, plug it into reflection, and 0.1 as a value. And that should do it for the eyes for the moment. We specifically haven't modeled a lens over it or anything. Normally for an eyeball you'd have a flat area where the iris is and then a lens domed over. We haven't done that on this model. We'll wait and see how it looks, what we need to do with it. But we'll leave that for now. Now, one of the things that really needs some work is the inner mouth. I noticed just recently, here I'll just save everything, that the inner mouth is skin. So it's saved as part of the whole rest of the skin material, and that's no good because we don't want to be calculating all the subsurface scattering and light transmission and stuff inside there. We want it to be pretty dark, and it's also a totally different color. It's much redder. So we need to go into our modeler, and we need to select those inner mouth polys. We need to find them. First I'll hide everything we don't need. Oops. And we'll just get in there and just look at our inner mouth. We definitely don't need any of this stuff. So we're just looking at these polys. Expand our selection. Get that starting to come out the lips. So we need to go back one, contract the selection one, and we'll call this inner mouth. And it should be fairly simple applying a material to this. Go back into layout, and we'll find in our surface editor now that we have an inner mouth material, and we'll just make it a dark red with no speck. Well, we'll see, but it should be fairly simple. So here's our inner mouth. I want to pick a nice dark fleshy red. And no speck. And there's also a tongue texture in there, so we'll need to do a similar idea. Here's our tongue. We can the tongue is UV'd, so we could definitely put a tongue material on here. However, he's not animating in this shot. And I see there's luminous value on there. So once again, let's see. We'll go for a nice tonguey red. It's kind of this orangey red, but darker and less saturated. And now that we don't have a luminous mouth interior, that's feeling a lot better. Now, a lot of people, I've done a lot of movies with a lot of characters and a lot of inner mouths, and there's always a discussion about, well, I can't see in there, I can't see the tongue, I can't see the inner mouth, and I really want to see them, so they force you to put a light in there or make it luminous or whatever. And if you ever look at any photographs, especially under direct sunlight, the contrast is so high that it's really pitch black in there. It really, really is. So if you're ever having that argument, show some reference. I mean, chances are they'll say, I don't care, I paid for it, I want to see it anyways. You might have to do that. Oh well. But at least you can make a good argument. To me, that looks a lot better. Now for our teeth are just a gray. I'm going to turn them up so that they're nice and white. I want them to be kind of heroically white. And I'm going to turn up, well, speck is already on, not glossiness. It should be nice and glossy. And I'm going to turn reflection up to about 15%. That should give us really nice shiny glossy teeth for when they rotate. So let's turn our skin back on. And let's just back off in this guy and see if we missed anything. Alright, so here is our master frag after an initial pass at all the textures. We haven't put any eyebrows or body hair on yet, but we'll get to that. What I'm mainly concerned with right now is how all of these materials are going to behave in a turntable. Doubtless there's going to be a bunch of mistakes. So what we'll do is we'll render out a turntable. First I'm going to light this a little bit better, and then we'll make an evaluation. So let's put in a little bit of superior lighting. The main issue is that our key light is really low right now. It's a distant light, so let's make it something more appropriate. For a sunlight, I hate using a distant light. And the reason I hate it is that it always casts perfectly sharp shadows, which is really unrealistic. So instead, I'm going to use a dome light. Let's turn on our OpenGL overlay so we can see it here. And a dome light is like a distant light in that it's infinitely distant. I'm going to position in the middle of the scene so we can see it. And I'll rotate it 0, 0, 0. And I'm going to turn it to an angle here. And now, in order to make it more like a sunlight, what I need to do is reduce its angle from 90 degrees to about 1 degree. And I want to turn it to get a nicer shadow. And also I'm going to be lighting in from the angle because I want to show off the form a little bit better. And the more shadows you have casting across itself, the better it's going to be. Now I need more of a realistic sunlight color, so that's going to go into my Kelvin color temperature, and I'm going to be looking in the 5,000 to 6,000 range. And my light intensity is way too low, so let's try 200%. Still way too low. You notice when we didn't have any textures on it and it was just linear gray, this amount of light felt way too bright. Okay, that's starting to feel realistic. So you have starting to get some nice areas of overexposure. And because we built all these materials similarly under the same kind of light, they theoretically should behave about the same. This is looking pretty nice to me. I might even go a little higher with that light. I'm going to try 500 just to see. Don't want to get it too crazy overexposed. And let's just check our render settings and see how many radiosity bounces we have going on there. Under global illumination, we have 1. Let's turn that up to 3 for our render. That'll add some really nice bounced illumination in some of the darker areas that traditionally don't get much light. And now that I've turned that up, that illumination feels a little high. So I'll open up my light properties and put that back to 400. And I'll turn off my OpenGL overlay so I can see my master frag here. I'll just take a couple of views at him. So I'm going to go into the perspective view here. And we'll just turn around and look at him from various sides. I can see a lot of things I'm going to want to work on for sure. Not least of which is this shoulder pad material. Now that I've turned the light on, has come way up, I think, too high. But we'll once again see that in the turntable and see how that's working. It looks like there's areas to the side of the pants that weren't part of the material, so we've kind of ended up with a white stripe down the side of the pants, which is a little bit interesting. But once again, we'll see it in the final turntable. So let's pick a nice camera angle. This one's okay for first render. It's a little bit boring, but we'll render from here, and I'm going to animate the guy to turn under the light. I prefer that to the camera going around, because if the camera goes around the guy for the turntable, then the light remains static on the object, and it doesn't really show off all the beautiful modeling work and specularity work and bump maps and sculpting that's been done. Whereas if you turn the object through the light, then the light plays across it as it turns, and it really shows off the beauty of the form. So a turntable is always going to be more attractive if the object is moving through the light rather than the camera rotating around the object or the object and the light rotating together. So I'll save this, set it up to do a turntable, and I'll come back when the render's done.